We've all done it, right? You click buy now, and then you wait. But have you ever really thought about what happens in between? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the modern warehouse. And it's so much more than just a big box full of stuff. This is the nerve center, the beating heart of the supply chain. And how well it runs? Well, that's what determines how quickly that package lands on your doorstep.
So let's start with what seems like a simple question, but actually has a pretty complex answer. We see the front end, the website, the checkout, but what about the journey itself? How does one single item navigate its way through a massive, sprawling facility, get into the right box, and find its way to your specific address? That's the exact journey we're going to map out.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start right there on the warehouse floor following a product step by step. Then we'll zoom out to the C-suite and talk about who actually owns these buildings and why that matters. After that, we'll get into the high-level strategy, look at when it makes sense to bring in outside help, and finally, we'll wrap up with the one big idea that ties this all together.
All right, let's dive right in. We're starting where all the action happens, inside the warehouse itself. We're going to trace the precise, almost dance-like movements that get products from a delivery truck all the way to a shipping dock. This is the operational core of everything.
You know, almost every single item follows this exact 6-step path. It all starts at receiving, where goods are unloaded and checked in. Accuracy at this stage is absolutely crucial. One small mistake here can cause a massive ripple of problems. Next up is put away. That's the process of getting the item to its designated spot on a shelf. Then comes storage. But the most critical step, the one everyone focuses on, is order picking. That's the physical act of finding and grabbing your specific item. And from there, it's on to packing and shipping, where it gets prepped for that final leg of its journey to you.
And just to put a finer point on that, take a look at this. Of all those steps we just mentioned, order picking is the giant. It is by far the most labor-intensive and expensive part of the whole operation. We're talking more than half of a warehouse's total operating costs can be tied up in just the simple act of grabbing an item off a shelf. You can see why companies are obsessed with making this one single process faster, better, and cheaper.
So you might be wondering, how does this incredibly complex dance not just fall into complete chaos? Well, the answer is the Warehouse Management System, or WMS. You really have to think of it as the central brain of the entire facility. It's the software that's tracking every single item, telling workers exactly where to go, what to pick, and keeping a perfect real-time record of everything. A modern warehouse is completely powerless without a powerful WMS.
Okay, so we've got a handle on the how, the processes, on the floor. Now let's ask a much bigger, more strategic question. Who? Who actually runs this building? Because the answer to that question is one of the most fundamental decisions a company has to make.
Broadly speaking, there are two main paths you can take. On one hand, you've got private warehousing. This is when a company, think of Walmart, owns and operates its own distribution centers. The upside? They have complete control. The downside? It requires a massive capital investment. The other option is public warehousing. Here, you're essentially renting space from a logistics company that serves lots of different clients. It's way more flexible and requires less cash up front, but you give up a lot of that control. This table does a great job of laying out those trade-offs. We've talked about private and public, but I want you to look at that third option in the middle, contract warehousing. This is a bit of a hybrid model. You get the benefit of dedicated, customized service from a partner, but without having to buy the building yourself. So what's the catch? Well, as you can see, the main drawback is that you're usually signing a long-term contract. You get the customized service, but you sacrifice some flexibility. But just deciding who owns the building is really only the beginning. Now, let's zoom out even further to the strategic level, because these are the big picture choices that really separate the leaders from the laggards in any industry. A truly world-class warehousing strategy is built on these 5 pillars. See, it's not just about the 4 walls of the building. It's about where you strategically place your warehouses. It's about the technology you integrate. It's how you manage your inventory and your people. And it's about how you design the physical layout to maximize every single square foot. Let's look at a few real-world examples to make this tangible. I mean, who better to start with than Amazon? They have absolutely mastered the location game. By building out a massive network of fulfillment centers incredibly close to major population centers, they've completely changed customer expectations. They made next day, and now even same day, delivery the standard. For Amazon, their warehouse network is their competitive advantage.
Now let's talk about Walmart. Their genius has always been in a combination of technology and brilliant layout design. Years and years ago, they pioneered advanced inventory tracking with things like RFID, and they perfected a technique called cross-docking. This is an incredible process where goods come in on one truck and are immediately sorted and moved onto an outgoing truck, sometimes without ever being stored on a shelf. It's pure, unadulterated speed. And then you have IKEA, whose entire strategy is built around product design and warehouse flow. That iconic flat pack design, that's what makes their just-in-time inventory system possible, which allows them to minimize costly storage space. And if you've ever walked through one of their stores, that winding path isn't an accident. It's a carefully designed layout that guides you through the process, making picking up to 20% faster. Every single detail is engineered for efficiency. Now, for many, many companies, running a massive, complex warehouse isn't their core competency. And that brings us to another huge strategic choice. When does it make sense to stop doing it yourself and call in the specialists? And this is where third-party logistics providers, or 3PLs, come into the picture. Simply put, a 3PL is a company whose entire business is handling logistics, things like warehousing, order fulfillment, and transportation for other companies. This is what they live and breathe. So here's how that partnership typically works. The business, let's say a clothing brand, sends its inventory to the 3PL's warehouse. The 3PL then receives it and stores it for them. When you, the customer, place an order on the clothing brand's website, that order gets transmitted directly to the 3PL's system. And it's the 3PL's team that then picks, packs, and ships the order. This allows the clothing brand to focus on what it does best, designing and marketing clothes. But wait, there's another layer to this, the 4PL. Here's the best way to think about the difference. If a 3PL is the executor, the one physically doing the tasks on the ground, then a 4PL is the orchestrator. They act as a strategic integrator, managing the entire supply chain. A 4PL is like the general contractor who might hire and manage several different 3PLs to build the perfect supply chain. They are the true strategic mastermind. So, we've come a long way. We've gone from the concrete floor of the warehouse all the way up to the high-level strategic decisions made in the boardroom. Now, let's bring it all home with the single most important lesson from all of this. And here it is. The bottom line is this. Warehousing is no longer just about storage. In today's hyper-competitive market, having a sophisticated, efficient, and strategic approach to warehousing isn't just a nice-to-have operational advantage. It is an absolute, fundamental requirement for survival and success. So, I'll leave you with a question to think about. Imagine you're advising a brand new e-commerce startup that has huge growth plans. Based on what we've discussed, which model would you recommend? The flexibility of public warehousing, the dedicated service of a contract partner, or would you tell them to go all in on a private facility? The way you answer that question, well, that gets to the very heart of the strategic challenges and trade-offs in all of modern logistics.